Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Zez Retro Podcast. I'm flying solo today talking to developer Dan Hands42. He was developer of the Litemenu project, and Litemenu was a custom menu loader for the PSIO ODE dongle plugin, that one that plugs into the parallel port at the back of the original PlayStation 1. So Dan tells us the story of how he started in PlayStation coding and hacking back in the day with his own version of the Yaroze system. And then we jump forward to him coming across a PSIO adapter, him seeing that the original official memory menu loader isn't that great. It's got some issues. So he tries to code his own. And then we've got a series of back and forth, sometimes known as drama in the retro games community. And eventually this culminates with the creator of PSIO sending some sort of legal threat to Dan, saying that if he releases this code, then all sorts of legal things are going to happen. And we get right into this. This is one of those cases, is it really? If someone just sends a legal letter, is that it? But what does that mean? If you have to respond to a legal threat, that's already costing you money. So this is starting to see how people can use this for their own benefit. Dan, I find, is very honest and very straight up about his part in all of this. He acknowledges where he could have acted better. Did he maybe provoke the creator a little bit too much? It's hard to say, because also that person has a very distinct reputation in the community for being a difficult person to work with, updates for years, and you would say maybe even exhibiting toxic behavior towards the customers. So it's one of those difficult ones. We're going to learn the story of Litemenu, how easy this code is. This is not some great project that he coded up to create this alternate menu. It's very, very simplistic because the way that PSIO runs its security is also very simplistic. Dan frankly answers the question, does he think this supports piracy of PSIO? It's a good question. We're going to get into that. All right, let's start the podcast with Dan Hands42. Dan, thanks for joining me on the Zez Retro Podcast. It's been ages since I've talked to somebody, but when I heard about your story and I saw you out there, I knew I sort of wanted to speak to you and get to the bottom of this, and let's find out this. So I've already presented a little bit of the backstory in our introduction. People are probably watching because they know something about this here. So we want to start with you, first of all. You coded the Litemenu. You made this stuff. But I mean, I think, look, you're very humble about your own ability, but I think it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to come up with this stuff and work with it, even though there are certainly many other very knowledgeable people in the community that you're very gracious to point to. But let's start with you. So what's your background? Where did you first get into computers, consoles? What was this?
As a kid, I was always into electronics. If you put something in my hand, I'm not interested in what it looks like. I want to know what's going on the inside. So, like, my dad had to keep screwdrivers away from me, all that kind of shit. And I can't remember. I was probably about 6 or 7. He got me some little electronics set. You know, the little thing with the little springs where you put the wires in. Yeah. And it kind of building crystal radios and all that stuff. And it kind of went from there. About age 8 or 9, I got my first computer, and I'm just on CPC. And obviously, as you did back then with BASIC, you just started programming, like guess a number and all that kind of stuff. And it sort of stemmed from there. Always wanted to get into computers when I was a kid, like as a profession. And then worked my way through BASIC, ended up on Visual Basic sort of in the early 90s, probably about version 3 or 4, something like that. Never did much with it. And ended up getting a job with a computer builder and manufacturer, and never did anything programming at all. It was like an interest thing. But the PlayStation part of it, or the C programming that I learned, a lot of that stemmed from reading about the Yaroze when I was younger. So I remember
reading about what, sorry?
The Yaroze, the Net Yaroze. Which is the
Net Yaroze.
I don't know how you pronounce it, but I
don't know how you say it. Sorry.
We'll stick with that.
I got an Australian talking to an English guy here. It's going to be like two Furbies talking to each other, trying to work out each other's bloody accents.
So
but actually, before we go, even just before that, I was sort of a little interested because you and I grew up in a common period. So you had the Amstrad, I had the Amiga 500. We had the games that we would play back then. So there was some games you could play, or it was load up the BASIC and try and work out something for yourself. It was that hack up. There was like almost like a feeling, a community spirit, if there was a community back then, of hacking or creating something for yourself, because these machines that we got, like the Amstrad and the Amiga, they came with the tools you want. They came with some sort of basic you could have a go. We were copying code from books in there because that was the only way to get that. So how do you, like, on the Amstrad, you were just writing stuff in BASIC, you just picked it up yourself and just sort of had a go?
Yeah, so a lot of it, like, I don't know if you remember, like, if the computers you had, but, like, the user manual used to actually have programs in the back of it as examples. So the actual Amstrad user manual was really comprehensive. It was, like, 2 inches thick. So in the back of there, I think it started with some typings out of there. And I think it might have been one of my grandparents got me, I think the book company was like Osborne or something, and they used to do kids' books for computers. And they used to do a book where it had like CPC, C64, BBC, and the programs were all the same for all of them. Then you had a couple of changes it did for each one, and a lot of it I learnt from there. So it was stuff like a crappy Grand Prix game with a car going in the middle of the screen and asterisks at the side for the track. And then it got built up with graphics, so I'd have routines in to do that. I'd start looking at adding joystick support and stuff rather than using the Z and the X keys and things. And yeah, little bits like that. And then...
That was great. So that was literally like writing it in from a book.
Yeah.
It came in a book and you had to type that shit in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember when I got the computer Christmas Day, I actually got a 464 for Christmas, and then my birthday was a couple of months later. My dad upgraded me to a 6128, but it was a bit of a shit, to be honest, because I spent ages typing this program. It was like, I don't know, 150 lines, so it went up to a count of like 1150. And it was like, oh, well, if you press Alt and Break or something like that, or whatever it was on the Amstrad to reset it, what happens? So I went and did that and lost everything. So it was like, great. But yeah, all on paper, initially saved on tape, and then there was annoying little 3-inch discs that cost a fortune. So yeah, good times.
Yeah. So, okay, so you've gone through that and how to say, that period left us with those ideas that you could hack your own stuff, or you could create your own stuff, or you could just get in there and have a go. And as you say, even though you left it behind and other things in life came along, there was still that idea, that this fascination with that. So this came, you later on had a job building PCs, which I also had. Turns out we had a lot of common things, building PCs when I was at university to make some money.
Yeah, it was
as well.
Yeah, it was cool. So like, yeah, the guy that owned this company, he was in a local hotel with some people from PC Magazine, which was a big magazine back in the 90s. And he was hosting them for dinner like the computer did, grooming them a little bit for a good review for whatever machines they were sending in. And I was just waiting, and I got talking to him, and it was like, oh, here's my card, give us a call. Because they were all computer people and all talking computers. Had an interview a couple of days later and started the Monday after. It was like 10 days or something. Next thing I know, I'm building 30 PCs a day or whatever on a production line and working my way up through that company. So yeah, very different, but pretty cool.
And that was the Wild West of building machines.
Oh, it was amazing.
That you got the parts, you stuck it together, and it, like, 1 out of 5 didn't work. There's a random blue screen. There's some random error that, like, I just remember having stress from calls from customers, like, it crashed again. And there wasn't even this knowledge about how often a machine could crash. They just don't crash like they used to.
We had, we weren't small, so we had some big clients. So we had like Acclaim Studios in Teesside. They were one of our clients.
Really?
Yeah. We had one of the film studios in London. We used to build PCs for them. We were a partner of Micron, so we did Micron technology cases and some of their motherboards and bits and bobs. So yeah, we weren't small, but yeah, we had the same problems. So stuff like Voodoo 3 came out, trying to run that on a VIA KT3 motherboard, fucking thing, blue screens all the time. You got to patch all this stuff in certain orders, or... Oh, yeah, it was, it's not like now you just plug everything in. There were so many weird things just trying to get stuff working. Normally it was, I don't know, I kind of miss it, to be honest. Made it more interesting.
Yeah. It was like still a time where you said, I mean, you had a fairly big operation. I had like a one guy kind of thing, where the one guy operation could still make a thing. And then Dell came along and HP, and sort of most people were buying these units out of, sort of the larger ones. Yeah, it was still a time where one guy could set up a shop and sell, and he was like the IT guy, and he could help at everything. It was that wild.
Yeah, because people were still looking at, I don't know, in the UK, I think the So I started in that in the late 90s, and a lot of my friends at school were sort of, the parents were earning Packard bells from our local PC world, where it was like £2,000, £2,000 for like a Pentium 100, and we're like, what? We could build you one of them for 500, 600, and that kind of thing. And obviously that just faded away as you went over the millennium. And I think they are sort of fell out of the market in the UK because loads of companies went bust. After that, including my then employer. I'd left them before then, but yeah, it was a bit of a shame, really. But yeah, it was definitely more interesting. And like you said, there was a little bit of meat in it for everyone. So you could build a PC for someone and just make a few quid and stuff like that, and everyone were doing it. And then Dell storming with their cheap.
Fell out.
Yeah.
I remember that was about probably, I was doing this at university when I had time to make a few extra bucks on the side. Yeah, I could make a couple hundred out of a thing, and hopefully it didn't crash too many times, so I didn't have to do too many call outs and go and see the guy. But I remember by the end, I remember being so fed up that I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna sell you a Dell. Or get you a Dell, at least. My services to get you a Dell, and then I'll just come and maybe install it, help you out with it. Like, it just wasn't worth my time anymore to construct this thing, because odds on that was going to be where the pain point was.
Definitely, and like, you're using Dell as an example, that's pretty much word for word what I used to say. Because, like, you know, I'm sat on a Dell. Well, I'm not sat on a Dell now. I'm actually sat on a Surface, but I've got a Dell there. There's a Dell down there. There's a Dell over there. I mean, I love their stuff. And if anyone says to me about buying a PC, it was always like, just get a Dell. You know, they're decent money. You can get parts for them. You know, they're fairly upgradable generally. You know, they're not really that bad, to be honest. They just took the ass out of the PC market, that's all.
So how did you come along the PlayStation development kit, the Yaroze? Because like in Australia, we were so far away from everything. We were like the little brother to the UK. I've told the story in the podcast many times about getting the magazines 3 months later. So I was connected to UK gaming culture, but not directly in it. And Yaroze was really one of those things that I was like, wow, maybe once I read about it. Was it around? How did you see it?
So I came across that I had a PlayStation at that point anyway, but I came across it in, I think it was Edge magazine. So there's one of their features, it's quite a silvery front, and it's got Yaroze on the front of it, and that's when I'd first heard about it. I've never owned one, never had my hands on one, never seen one in the flesh. I just remember reading about that, and I had internet access at the time, so I was looking around, and I think there was some of the Scottish universities had picked them up, and they were using them for some of their programming courses or some of their courses. So yeah, they were around quite a lot, and they intrigued me because it was like, well, what's the difference? I remember downloading the order form and looking at them and thinking, God, I wouldn't mind writing a check. I can't remember how much they were at the time. I think they did them quite cheap. They started off more expensive and they went down to like £250 or something. Okay. And you could send a check away, and you'd get one in the post 14 days later.
A check.
I know. Do you know what the funny thing is? I've read stories since on news groups that apparently a lot of the time they didn't even cash the checks. Yeah, I mean, you might want to look that up, but apparently a lot of the checks didn't get cashed.
That was just with Sony, their ordering system or something. There was some...
Whoever banked the checks didn't bank the checks.
Good time.
But yeah, and then about the same time, sort of doing, I'd say Googling. It wasn't Google then, was it? It was probably Hot Dog or Alta Vista or something. I came across like a GeoCities website, and it had the Yaroze SDK on it and some information about how the serial cable was put together, which is the bit that links it to a PC. And it also had some action replay codes that you could use to actually boot the boot disk on a PlayStation. So I was like, fucking hell, I could make my own here. And it kind of went from there. So got the serial cable built, burned the disk, popped it in, Next thing you know, I'm sending code from my PC and from the examples over to my normal grey PlayStation running this Yaroze boot disk. And it kind of sort of went from there.
So did you have, so your so you didn't have a Yaroze box as such. No. So you've got, first of all, I assume, being a gentleman of the generation, you've got the classic mod chip in your PS1 at least. Yeah. Of course, exactly. Everyone. That was my first foray into breaking a PlayStation back then. And that was a lot of money back then for us because still can't solve it for shit. Definitely couldn't solve it for shit back then.
If I show you some of my stuff around here, I'm exactly the same. If it works, it works. I'm not bothered about pretty. I'm no Volta.
Oh, yes. Who could be? Who could live up to such a standard? So you've got a chipped PS1 from back in the day. So work us through what you needed to how was the Yaroze connecting into your retail box?
So basically, the Yaroze is just a PlayStation. It's just a different color. I mean, there are other differences, like it can play multi-region discs. It's got a different CD controller, whatever. But yeah, the fundamental thing is it's the same thing. It's 2 meg RAM. It's all intents and purposes the same thing. The only thing it does have is obviously it comes with those accessories. So you've got that boot disc, the disc that boots up, where you see the little brick screen on the background.
The boot disc.
That's it, yeah. And then you've got the memory card. Well, it's called an access card. So when that boot disc boots up, it checks for this particular type of memory card plugged in a slot. And if it's not there, it doesn't do anything. So there's that element of it, which when I was talking about action replay, that circumvents that.
Okay.
And then on the other side, on the PC, between the two, you've got a serial cable. So, I mean, like nowadays with Arduino and all that kind of thing, everyone's really, knows about TTL level serial and stuff like that. But that wasn't that well known back then. So yeah, to build the cable, basically, you've got a RS-232 to TTL serial cable running at 3 volts between the two, between your PC and the PlayStation. So you write your code on your PC, you compile it, and then you use a tool called PSIO cons, which sends it over to the what would be the Yaroze, or in my case, the grey PlayStation.
Okay. And so the Yaroze machine has a serial port built in. That's an extra.
Yeah, it's like I'll show you actually.
Oh yeah.
So this is a normal PlayStation. Can you see?
Yep.
So Yaroze there normally would have its little black cable with the soap on the box on it. The one I've got here, USB version. So we've moved on a bit now. So yeah. So you can just do it with the USB cable now. So yeah, normally that would be a black PlayStation with this serial cable between the two, but we just did it with a grey one and then built the serial cable myself.
All right. That's how it got in. Sorry, and I realize I'm being very pedantic here. The Yaroze machine itself has the serial port, or it has the regular transfer port, but it's like a dongle, you're saying?
It's just got a normal, it's exactly the same as a normal retail
Exactly
port.
Exactly the same. But the link cable port.
That's it, yeah. That's the one. It's the actual cable itself that does the conversion.
Okay.
So you could actually use the Yaroze serial cable with a normal grey PlayStation. It would work, because it's exactly the same. Port.
Gotcha. So the transfer cable, did you have to, like that port, you had to cut up a transfer cable or something, or you just sort of stuck the wires in?
Yeah, so obviously link cables were a thing back in the 90s and they were quite cheap. So I found this website that sort of explained what the pinouts were. It was like, all right, just buy a link cable, chop it in half. That's what I did.
All right.
So yeah, chopped in half, beeped out which colour went to which pin on the plug, worked out ground, went from there, and obviously with the information that I've seen on the website that I've mentioned earlier, told me how to build like literally RX to TX, TX to RX, that kind of thing. Put the hardware between the two, which is called a MAX 232. It's a transceiver, converts TTL to RS-232 and back and forth. And off you go, and that's all it was.
All right. So then you could start. So then you had the IDE or development environment or whatever it was on the PC. So the GeoCity site gave you all of that, and then you could write some code there, and it uploads it to the Yaroze. Is that's
correct? Yeah. So yeah, it was like a really simple version. It was cut down version of PSIO, I believe. So there's some similarities between there. But yeah, there was 2 ways you could do it actually. There was one called, I've forgotten the name of it. There was a Windows-based Code Warrior, that was it. You could use a thing called Code Warrior, which was all within Windows. It had its own compiler and stuff. I never used that. I used the DOS tools. So yeah, just edit in Notepad, save it, type make, off you go.
And what sort of apps were you making? Or because as I understand, it was quite limited. You certainly didn't get access to the full range of the PSX hardware, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. So there were some bits you didn't get. So the funny thing is, the CD itself, this boot CD, it has assets on it that you can use. So there's some graphics on there. You can make it if you can make it play CD. There's some CD audio tracks on there you can use for like ambient audio. There's some fonts and things like that you can use. So yeah, a lot of it was just doing little simple things like that and then building on the examples. I never did anything groundbreaking or even worth mentioning, to be honest. A lot of it was just trying to use it as like a standard C compiler just on a PlayStation for shits and giggles, to be honest. So yeah, it was just your standard console stuff to start with, like text-based coming across the serial port. And then one of the dreams I had, I've always been a Chuckie Egg fan. I always wanted to make my own version of Chuckie Egg for the PlayStation. So I think I had that in my head at the time and never got any.
Chuckie Egg, like the flight.
No, Chuckie Egg.
No. Chuckie Eggs?
Yeah,
What's Chuckie Egg?
Oh, it's like a platformer like Donkey Kong where you go around collecting eggs and you've got chickens chasing you about. It's the most simplest shit game ever, but it's got quite a cult following. Yeah, and it was the first game I played as a child, so I've always had a bit of an affinity with it. So yeah, I wanted to do that. I think that was getting probably for 97, 98, and I had other stuff going on in my life, so it was kind of, I'd do little bits with it, and there wasn't the community that there is now. And obviously I didn't have access to all the Net Yaroze forums and things like what you get with the retail, well, if you actually bought it, because you had the access code to get onto the members website, and I didn't have any of that. So yeah, I was quite stuck really. I didn't get a lot out of it, so it kind of, after, I think, mucked around with them for probably 6 to 12 months at that point, and then it just got pushed to one side and got on with growing up and partying and other daft things when you come into money in your early 20s or late teens.
I can understand that. I had the same, I had the PlayStation 1, and then I had sort of this, I don't know, I want to say how many years it was, where I didn't play games at all, didn't have a console. I didn't have much money, like you're working for. I mean, I had money, but not enough to sort of start to go splurge, especially with expensive Australian prices. So I only came back into gaming consoles like at the Wii or something like that, and then went hardcore again. So yeah, I understand how that, being of that same generation, the PS1 was that last hurrah, and then, you know, girls, and then life, and then jobs come along.
Girls were expensive. But yeah, I think I did have a PS2. I had a Dreamcast, Xbox. I mean, I had the PS2 and the Dreamcast. I probably played a couple of games on them a lot, and not much else. Xbox got really into Project Gotham, but yeah, after with the advances in console programming, I was like, God, I ain't got a clue how to do these things, because it's a very different way of thinking when you're programming something that runs on a Z80 like an Amstrad compared to when you get into something like a PS2 where you've got co-processors and all this stuff to do with it, and it's like, what? I wouldn't even know where to start. But yeah, the PlayStation was about my limit of understanding, I think. So yeah, it kind of probably got mothballed from like late 90s and didn't do a lot with it other than play the odd games on them and that kind of thing. Until probably nearly 10 years later.
Okay. So how did you come back to this? How's the story of your revival?
I've always had a PlayStation, so the PlayStation I showed you is the one I've had since a kid. My actual original
always there impressing the ladies when they come over, no doubt. Hey ladies, still got the grey box.
Still got the original one. My old original 1002's up there that I don't touch anymore. So yeah, I've still got them. So yeah, I've always had one on my desk. There's always been one at the end there. I've always had an Explorer cartridge hanging off the back of it. One of these. Because you used to use that for connecting to your PC as well and doing development stuff. So I've always had the kit kicking around. And it probably didn't start then. It was probably 2010, 2011. I signed up to, do you remember Assembler Games forums?
No, I don't.
Oh, there was the big forum, and it was mainly about obscure hardware, like the development hardware that the game companies use and that kind of thing. So it's all like the PSIO consoles, or they call them, or the debug PlayStations, like the blue ones, the PlayStation 2 tool, collectors of things like that. And I ended up joining up there, and it was like, oh, God, people are still talking about all this kit from way back when. And there was a lot of people on there that were quite knowledgeable, and it kind of probably sparked it a little bit. Again, wanting to get back into it, which is funny because that's when sort of Matt or Sibdin, whatever you want to call him, Shadow, whoever we're calling him today, that's when he sort of joined on that forum as well and started talking about what became PSIO. But yeah, it was that forum generally that got me back into it. People talking on there about the weird hardware, things that I'd not seen when I was younger. I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind getting one of those now as an adult. And that kind of started me off a little bit again, getting back into it.
Okay, so you get it back into it. So let's kind of fast forward to the PSIO. So first of all, do you remember what year it came out? What it was released?
I should have done this 20
research.
16, something like that.
Something like this. Okay, something around there. So, and to set it all up, as I've understood, you don't and still don't have an official PSIO.
No, I don't.
Okay, so you haven't got one of those. So the PSIO comes out. It's pretty much, as I've understood, not too like it was cloned pretty quickly.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was a couple of years. I think.
Okay.
As far as I know, quote me on it. But yeah, I think it was a year or two after. I think it was cloned.
Okay, so it's getting cloned. I don't know the full, like, I haven't been there from the beginning of how Matt dealt with the community. I just know that it has certainly been a positive way, and people usually don't have a positive thing to say about the customer service and so forth. But when did you first encounter the PSIO? Did you get one and you decide did it just seem like a cool tool for hacking?
It was a friend of mine who'd seen them. So obviously they must have been around for when I first had a clone or saw a clone. I had a clone in my hand. I think it was about 2021, early 2021. Okay. So it was way after the clones had come out. And a friend of mine had bought one from AliExpress, and he's like, "Mate, can you fit this?" Obviously, I'm the go-to guy, so it's like, "Yeah, all right." And I just like, I'll be honest, I don't play that many games on my PlayStation because of the disc stuff and burning them, and I don't own many originals, and the prices are crazy now. So I thought, well, I'll maybe pick one of these up. But I mean, I can go into that, but the official route to me has never been an attractive option because of the way that people are treated. I don't really want to be paying for something on credit card and they're having to wait 6 to 9 months and all the other stuff and all the other bad stories about that came out. So it kind of, the official route never seemed like an option to me. So I just ordered a clone and got one.
Okay. So you've ordered the clone, right? So you were interested to get one, but you understood the reputation that the device had in the community already. It was well known. I wasn't even watching, and I knew to kind of stay away from that. So, and that's not only the customer service level, but also the compatibility, that it wasn't quite up to snuff when it came to full compatibility on games and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't play a lot of titles that you probably find that are rare, that would be these outliers that don't work. A lot of the stuff I've tried on it works fine. I played like the normal classic games, a bit of Doom, a bit of Ridge Racer, whatever, bit of Gran Turismo, that kind of stuff, and get my ass kicked by my son on Tekken every now and again. So yeah, a lot of it I don't play a lot of weird titles. So for me, the compatibility it wasn't really a problem because I don't play any weird titles. But the whole, you've got to convert them to this weird Q sheet format. That was a bit of a detractor for me. I didn't quite like. So you couldn't just put a bin and a Q on an SD card. It had to be this CU2 format that they devised, which was which was another step that you had to do. So if you use CD audio, I think you basically had to use a different style of Q sheet. So you had to convert a Q sheet to what they called a Q sheet 2 or something. So yeah, it was a little bit more. There was a little bit more to it than that. So yeah, I think my SD card for mine's got about 8 or 9 games on it, or something like that, because I just can't be bothered copying and converting all these different games over to it. So yeah.
Sure. Were there tools to? So it's just the bin was the same, but the Q sheet.
That's correct.
Was
yeah.
Different.
So yeah. It kind of. I think you couldn't use something like, you can't use multi-track queues and bins. So you couldn't have a track 1 bin, track 2 bin, track B bin like that. You have to merge them all together. Some people that were members, I think, wrote like a Python tool that squished it all together and spat you out a Q sheet too to make it a little bit easier. But yeah, it was a little bit more involved.
Right. And so what we're talking about here for everyone, the format that the PlayStation ISO can be on. ISO is one format, the .iso. Another format, if you're into homebrew games, you may have encountered the bin and Q. The bin file is the binary, and the Q is essentially a text file, which gives you some information about how to use the binary file. And sometimes that binary can be split into multiple, so one Q file with multiple binaries, and it is a bit of a pain to merge them. I've got a bunch of tools to do it, but it's it's a bit of a pain. So we've got to just get our games onto the PSIO was a little bit difficult already.
Yeah, I mean, there were some games you could just drop on and they'd work. So if they didn't use CD audio or anything like that, they'd just work. And then other ones you obviously had to convert them like that. So yeah, and then I think it was when I was downloading games off various sites that were never quite in the right format. So you always had some work to do before you try it, and it was just it was a bit painful, to be honest. But
okay, first of all, the clones. So were the clones using the official firmware, or how did they get around such things?
I don't know, to be honest. So yeah, the firmware on them is literally, it's official. So they've got it out of the arm somehow. I would not know how. I don't even know how they exploited it, if they did, or if they got the thing delidded or whatever. Sorry, decapped. Or if there's some exploit known for that particular microcontroller, I'm not sure. But how they did it, I don't know. But yeah, the firmware on there, for all intents and purposes, was back then a current firmware.
Okay, the current firmware.
So yeah, it's
I was
all it's completely all theirs. It's not changed from anything that they released.
right. If you're buying from AliExpress, you are getting the software product, the firmware from Sybin. What do we say?
Sybin, I don't know.
Sybin.
Try not to say the word too much, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an older version. So yeah, obviously after the clones, measures got put in place, so it was a little bit more difficult. But yeah.
Oh, okay. So he did a little bit more on that. All right. Now, reading through your documentation, if I understand the three sort of main components that we are concerned about on the PSIO, one is the menu software, which is what Litemenu was replacing. Then on the actual device, we've got the microcontroller firmware, and then we've got the FPGA firmware that gets flashed onto that. Have I understood correctly? They're the main
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the other bit you've got on here is... There we go. Let's pull this off. So this is the culprit. So yeah, we've got FPGA, you got your ARM, and then the other little bit, if you can see it just there, is that tiny little SPI chip.
Yep.
So that actually holds the software for both that and that. That's contained within there as well. So yeah, there's actually three main parts to it. But yeah, basically, yeah, you've got two firmwares and a menu to get things up and running.
Right. Okay. So somehow the AliExpress cloners had done something that it still worked. So all right. So what's your story then? So you've got one of this. You've got the hacker mindset, and your friend's giving you this device, and you think, "Fuck it, I can do a better job than this." Or how does that work?
So yeah, it were a little bit of that. So one of the things I do a lot of, obviously talked about, is playing around with it's a PlayStation code. This thing used to sell itself as the ultimate PlayStation development tool, but it doesn't have any development options. And it was like, wow, that's a really easy thing to fix. You can just use the serial port like a Yaroze did. So there was that element of it. And then there was also just how long it takes to actually get to a game from when you boot the thing up. Because you've got this menu, then you've got things loading, you've got a marquee scrolling across the bottom, and then you select a game, and then there's another menu pops up, and you've got to click another button. And it just felt like... this hardware can't be that slow. It's got to be this software. It must be. So yeah, there was that, and then obviously what PSIO put out, saying, you know, we've got this. There's all this bloat in it. You've got all this checking for paranoia that the firmware's not being meddled with, checksums and things. So it's like, well, that must have a bearing on it, surely. So yeah, I thought, okay, let's have a look at this then and see if we can do anything with it. It can't be that hard. It's just the menu. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Okay, so you started to dig in, and also reading through your documentation. So the menu, which is the bit that you worked on, and I'm quoting from what you said. When the PSIO boots, it looks for menu.sys, which is basically just an ISO file. So did you work that out? How did you come to that conclusion? You just
PSIO.
looked at
So yeah, they've got it all on their GitHub repo. Yeah. Right. So it was literally, it was just, I think it was just said there, like, so yeah, it just said that basically menu.sys is just literally, it's an ISO, it's just a bootable ISO that's got the menu within it. So if you get a copy of Ridge Racer and just call it menu.sys and chuck it on an SD card, the PSIO will just boot Ridge Racer instantly every time. Because that's how it works, kind of thing. So yeah, but yeah, I didn't find that out. That's PSIO that did the work on that.
All right, so then you've understood that, okay, if I can create my own PlayStation app, program, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the apps, we didn't use the word app back then. But I could make my own PlayStation game program that would interface with the PSIO. Then I could replace the menu and maybe get rid of a lot of the bloat, maybe make it a little bit more efficient. So then, though, you would have had to learn something about the microcontroller and the FPGA on the PSIO, or interfacing with it at least. So was this also with the PSI-owned project? Did that already have that information as well?
So they had some information. They didn't actually give me a lot. I actually got in touch with them way later than when. So when they announced what they did, I didn't actually start speaking to them and working with them until months after, a couple of months after. But yeah, if you notice on the PSIO website, they mention that there's you can actually get a debug output from the ARM chip, and it'll tell you what it's doing all the time. Which, if you can see on here, those little two coloured cables, and they go around on the other side and connect to that FTDI. There, that gives me my debug output from when it's running. So I was like, oh I wonder what this is going to tell me then. So literally wired it up, plugged it in, and this thing's telling me all the commands that it's sending to and from the CD controller, and it's literally just spilling its heart out to me over the UART. And it's just telling me exactly what it's doing. So yeah, from doing that and then looking at, basically I've got one window that's got a serial output, which is from there, that's telling me what it's doing. And on the other window, I've literally got the actual PlayStation output on the screen. So I can sort of time code the two together and find out what's happening and when. And then from then it was like, oh, it's sending this CD command. That's not an official CD command. And then obviously built on that and built on that and built on that. And then we had a menu.
Okay, so that's how you built the menu up yourself. Would you say, again, I have found you to be quite humble, but in your words, but do you think the Litemenu, was it particularly sophisticated? On what level of sophistication did you think you had to do to actually get this going?
So Litemenu is really simple. Like, it's about 250 lines of code. Of my writing, that's it, yeah. Right. Yep, so a lot of the other stuff in there, obviously, because you've got quite a complex machine there, really. You've got loads of other libraries that make things work. But the way that a PSIO works is it just pretends to be a CD controller. Now, the original one that's in the PlayStation has like a hole in the middle of the commands. So they stop at like 20 hex, and then they don't start again until like 50. So you've got this unused area in the middle that you could just use whatever you want, and that's where all the PSIO commands sit. So they're above and below the official commands, and then that was basically it. So it was like, you send a command, it checks if it's there. You send another command, select this ISO, select this other one, it reboots the machine. Send another command, it can disable it, that kind of thing. And yeah, they're just literally, you send like a 0x21 to the CD controller, wait for an IRQ, pop, it's disabled or whatever, that kind of thing. It's really simple. So yeah, it's literally just sending single byte commands to a controller on it, inside it, and then reading the right responses. The rest of it is literally, it's the PSIO software on the ARM and the FPGA that are doing the work still. So yeah, the menu is very simple.
Okay, so the menu is very simple. You said about 250 lines of your own code, something like this. And you said some libraries. Now those, because the reason I'm digging into this a little bit is because of the statements that were made by Sibdin, saying that, all sorts of claims. I'm pretty sure they would say anything to back up it. You're using their code, you're using their stuff. What are these libraries that you said you were accessing?
So in the interests of who wrote them, I can't say which libraries it used because it's unfair to that individual. But they are completely open source. They are used in other software projects. The person who wrote that code, the code's out there, you can find it. But the person who's there don't want to be associated with any of this at all. So to respect their wishes, I'd rather not say. However, it doesn't use anything from Sibdin at all, because that's just Sony's libraries that they've used. So yeah, I'm fine with not using that. So yeah, I didn't use any of that at all.
Okay, so we will get into that a little bit. So the reason that Dad is so coy about this, because there has been difficulties in the community with personal attacks and stuff like this. So to not highlight so I understand why you want to do that. So we need these extra libraries to access different parts of the hardware, and either you could use the built-in Sony libraries, or this particular open source developer has released their versions of them, and that's what you were incorporating in your code.
Yeah, so it wasn't for anything particularly magic. So stuff like mounting the CD, passing an ISO file system, passing the system CNF, which is like on a PlayStation, that's like your auto exec bat from back in PC days. Tells it what file to start and things like that. The code that passes that and boots all that up, that kind of thing, I didn't write that. That's part of the libraries. That's all those libraries did. And that's all I provided.
Okay, so they're open source, so that's it. So okay, you've created this menu system. It sounds like, my interpretation is, just for your own hacking thing. You're a hacker. You've want to, and I use that in the good terminology, a homebrew developer. You're frustrated with something. The slow pace of development now on the PSIO is dragging on as well. There is not any sort of, or much as I understand it all, official updates coming from PSIO at this stage. So it's not like the official developers are adding to this and going this. It's your frustration that this product isn't being supported. Is that another part there?
Pretty much it, yeah. So, like, yeah, I mean, a couple of my friends that are on our Discord server, they sort of said the same thing. You know, like, it doesn't actually offer any development opportunities. It's a bit of a waste, that kind of thing. And obviously, getting the hardware on the PSIO to do development-related tasks is now impossible without you writing a custom firmware from scratch, be it for the FPGA and the ARM. So my initial idea was just to literally get it to boot, like some sort of ISO that will give me like a serial dummy server that I can upload my own code to. If you've ever used Unirom, something along those lines, which is a PlayStation tool, which is excellent, by the way, for that kind of thing. So yeah, it was just to try and get me some development features initially, and maybe just to boot the CD if I wanted to. And yeah, basically for my own personal gain, and to see, well, basically to offer people, you know, you've got this missing piece of a puzzle. This bit of code here provides it. It doesn't really step on your toes or anything. And that was basically my initial goals.
Right, and you've kind of essentially clean room developed it, that it's not actually using the Sibdin libraries or any of their stuff. Just something that came to my mind right now. If the menu dot... Wait, what's that sound? Is there a clicking? No. There was a weird clicking in the speakers back there. No problem.
Can't hear anything, sorry.
It's all right. Where am I going with this? So the menu.sys is its own bootable. I don't know why, if this would make a difference or not, but could the your Litemenu just be burnt to a CD? Could it load from a CD rather than having to be a file on the SD card or something like that? It works the same.
So yeah, if you put my Litemenu and just literally burnt the menu sys to a CD and popped it in, it'd literally pop up and say it can't detect a PSIO. Because that's part of the code. Yeah,
sure. Okay,
but
so
yeah,
until you put a PSIO in.
That's it. Yeah, but yeah, by all intents and purposes, you could just boot it on any machine. It's not really, other than the parts it needs to communicate with the PSIO to get the information it needs, like the list of games that are on the SD card or anything like that. It doesn't rely on anything on the PSIO at all. It's it's just an application like anything else. So yeah, if it was named an ISO and recorded to a disk, it'd just boot.
And do all PSIO official and unofficial versions, do they all need that extra little mod chip looking part that goes with it as well? What's that part?
Yeah, so the way that PSIO works is you've got, within the PlayStation, you've got the CD controller. And the way that PSIO works is it literally, that switchboard switches off the internal one and it flips all the control signals to PSIO cartridge on the back. And because these signals can't be, well, they're not actually externally routed correctly, that's why you have that little mod board. So when your PSIO is enabled, it switches off the internal CD controller. When you choose to boot a real CD with the PSIO, it flicks it the other way back, so it uses the internal CD controller again, and that's all that does. It's literally just it's like a, I don't know, probably about a 4 or 5 prong switch. So it just switches some signals between the original inside and the PSIO, that's it. So yeah, it's 100% required.
All right, and it's not a classic mod chip, but at least on visual inspection, it seems like as hard or as easy to install as an OG mod chip. Like you've got to open the machine up, do some soldering to different points underneath there.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit harder. I think there's 2 really tricky little tracks where you've got to cut them with a knife to basically isolate the signal, then you jump in some wires in. But yeah, if you can do one of those old, whatever they are, 7 or 8 wire stealth mods from back in the day, I'm pretty sure you'd be fine with it. They're not hard. And I mean, to be fair, I've never even used those. I'm a bit lazy, so I use the Voltar solution, which basically it sticks on the underneath of the parallel port at the back. And it doesn't require as many cuts and wires. It's a little bit simple. I forgot what they call it. SIOX, I think it is. Yeah, I'm lazy, so I just use those. But yeah, I don't know. It's probably a 2 out of 5 in difficulty scale, probably. Most people should be able to do it. You just got to take your time.
Sure. So far, we sort of just been focusing on your efforts. You're a homebrew developer. You've made this thing. But I'd like to now relate this story back to the community and then Matt starts to come in, the original developer of PSIO. So take us through that timeline of things. You're developing something and what you're talking about it on the community, and you're saying, hey guys, I've got this, but I haven't released it yet. What is that timeline? How does that go?
So I initially discovered some of the commands that do various things. So I think it started with like, oh, I can actually just switch off PSIO even though I booted from it and just boot original CD. You can disable and enable fast boot. So rather than booting up like a normal PlayStation that takes quite a while, showing you the logo and things, you can just make it boot like a cheat cartridge does. So I found the options for that. So initially, my original project and the kind of, probably the thing I bragged a little bit about, if I'm honest, was I've made this thing where you've got a menu where you can either choose to boot Unirom, so you can do your serial development stuff and all that like would use Unirom, or you can just boot the official menu from Sibdin. So you had like a dual boot kind of thing that worked.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started, and that was I think I was dropping bits about that on the psx.dev Discord, and then I put some pictures up on sorry, not pictures. I put a bit of a video up on YouTube about it just to see if there was any interest, because that was a thing. There was a lot of people quite vocal about not having any updates. So I thought, I wonder if there's anyone else interested in this kind of thing. So yeah, that's where it originally started. Was with that, and then obviously as I started discovering more commands and making more things work, I did more videos, talked about it a little bit more, figured out how it worked, and then yeah, we got up to like probably last June, something like that. June.
Okay. Have you, at this stage then, have you released any code for Litemenu, or what have you released to the public at this stage?
Nothing.
Okay.
So yeah, there's nothing released. My initial idea was to get a couple of people for maybe like a closed beta kind of thing. Like I alluded to before, there's some code in there that belongs to somebody else, which is open source, but they don't want to be associated with it. So my idea was initially to look at that code and literally rebuild it myself. So use that as an example, strip out what I don't need, keep the things I do need, so that person's absolved of anything to do with it. And as a learning exercise for myself as well, because that was one of the other things that sort of fueled it a little bit, was I know nothing about the CD controller in a PlayStation, so I wanted to learn a little bit more, which this kind of did help with.
It's admirable that you are thinking of the people who are involved here, and you said this other developer with their library that they've made, and you don't want them involved. But if that library, is it on GitHub? Is it available? Like, is it, or what? How come you can't just say, hey, I downloaded their library, they don't know nothing about it, I'm using it? Is that not publicly available? What's up with that library then?
It's publicly available. It's not on GitHub. It's getting on a bit now. Yeah, all it was, I'm quite good friends with this person who wrote this code, okay. And quite a lot of people are, and they were just like, I don't want this, I don't need this, kind of thing. So, we just not mention my name in it. And then I kind of went a step further, and I was like, I need to, I really want to respect their wishes here. I don't want anything, I don't want them to have anything to do with it at all. So yeah, that's kind of how that went about. But yeah, the code's out there. It's part of an old development kit for the PlayStation. If you look hard enough, it is out there. It's on a couple of the old scene sites that have been kicking around since the late 90s. Come across it quite easily.
Okay, so this attitude that a few people in the community have that they don't want to be associated with, is this because the possibility of your tool could be used for piracy, or is it that they don't want to get involved with what seems to be a rather toxic developer and a toxic community? Or what's that? Why are people worried about being involved?
I won't say worried, but yeah, it's mad. People just...
Okay.
They can't be asked with it.
Straight up.
Yeah, okay. That's it. It's just Matt. Yeah.
Okay, so the developer of PSIO, he, by now, as I understand, has displayed so many negative traits, negative qualities to the community, the way that he's reacting, that the people just don't even want to be associated with it. I don't want my name anywhere near this. I don't want to know anything about it. Is that it? Like,
yeah, pretty much. I mean, in honesty, there are people that do go on the forums and stuff. I mean, it's quite complicated with who's who and everything. But like, I think it was one of the developers of one of the expanded versions of a thing called Tony Hacks. They're quite a big poster on these forums now. Martin Korth, No Cash is called, who's one of the great people around the PlayStation scene, although very quiet and a recluse. He posts a lot on there with technical information. So there are people that do get on with this guy, but there's a hell of a lot that don't. A lot.
Okay. And so the feeling is that if the feeling from these other people who have concerns, is it that oh, if I'm associated with this, then I might get some of the toxicity of the community directed at me. So that means there must be some previous examples of someone who's tried to mess in the community and got a negative or to the level of toxic reaction from Matt or his company, and so other people have just shied away. Is that where we're going with
It's a little bit, yeah. So, I mean, Matt and who Matt is quite a complicated subject in itself. So, yeah, we can talk about it later or whatever, but I think the thing that is that puts a lot of people off is rubbing even up against him. Was it like there's examples of it around. There were people who didn't get a timely response on ordering a PSIO, and then they did chargebacks, and he literally doxed them on his website and threatened to. So he was going to say, I'll put your name and your address and your credit card details, and you'll go on a bit of a shit list on our website, which I believe happened with a couple of people, and then I think he realised that he shouldn't be doing things like that, and then they got removed. So it's those kind of things that it's just like, if you've got a guy that's fueled by that much hatred for something so minor, what's he going to be like about, someone fucking around with his software? And, it might be all steam and piss and whatever, and he might just be mouthing off, but, if he finds some information, people don't want that. It's, we've got lives to get on with, I guess, and, Right.
Sure. So I guess that's what I was trying to build this picture here for people who may not know part of the situation. That, look, in our retro gaming community, unfortunately, this negativity just, I don't know, whether it's we're all a bunch of autistic nerds or something, and these things can come up. And I think we're all used to a certain level of that and all used to a certain level of sort of maneuvering through such things. But it seems that the experiences of people seem to be really negative, really shit, and he's done some things like that. So the website thing, as we understand, I'm not entirely sure of that, but it seems like personal information was put out there. But then there's also negative reactions to people in the community, people asking for things, people wanting customer support, getting very negative. So the whole picture is just, I don't want to be communicating with this individual.
Yeah, I don't and that was the thing. Like, the person who wrote that software, the bits of software that I used to build Litemenu, they were just like, I don't want that to deal with anything like that. I don't even give a shit about his product. I don't even want my shit used for it, but you've used it, and it's in terms of the license, so you can. But it's kind of against my wishes, and I was like, yeah, well, I'm not bothered about what license is. I'd rather respect this person's wishes, so that's kind of what I did. But yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. So do I detect, however, in you, Dan, a small, I don't know, a sense of the rebel in you a little bit that, okay, if the bully's out there, then we're not going to sort of back down straight away. And that you went for this a little bit. And eventually you did, decide you had a limit. We all had a limit. But at first, you haven't been turned away by this attitude.
No, so yeah, I before we even get to the point where emails got exchanged, I'd done a lot of background on this person. We've got quite a substantial file of information, addresses where this person, lots of stuff. So yeah, I fully did my background before I was doing this. So I was like, has this guy got any patents? Has he got any trademarks? Has he got any copyright? Has he fuck? So it was all this kind of thing. He's registered as a sole trader, just like my dad was as a decorator or something. It's not even you can't even trademark the name of the product because it's actually already another product in Australia, which is like some MP3 player glasses thing or something. It was just like, you know what? Yeah, fuck this guy. I'm going to go for it, which is why, obviously, my initial response was quite ballsy. Probably not the best in hindsight, to be honest. I was quite fired up when I wrote it, but yeah, that was, a bit of rebel in there, I think, definitely.
Okay, so at first, all right, he's pushing at you, and you're like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna, I could push back a little bit." Right. So as I've understood, Matt in Australia is a sole trader, which means you're not an incorporated company. And I remember I was a sole trader when I was selling PCs back in the day. I was a sole trader, registered in Australia with the Australian business number and all that. And because that's the individual, like, what to say, when you make a company, you can you get the for the word, the indemnity or the protection of the company. If things go bust, it's the company that goes bust. But if you're the sole trader, then you have full liability, full personal liability.
Exactly.
If someone sues, it's on you. And that's why these days I certainly don't trust or don't go to sole traderships anymore. But this person, that's very interesting. Like, it's not that hard to make a company in Australia. We're pretty backward, but not that backward that it's not that hard to make a PTY Ltd.
Yeah.
I don't know why they've chosen that.
I can't answer that. Yeah, like, you know, in the UK, you can go and get a company in a box for 250 quid. You know, and do a trading as whatever. Yeah, you know, then you've got your limited liability and everything. Why someone would choose that route, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I don't know the GST or VAT is because we got the VAT in Australia, but we couldn't just call it VAT because that'd be too fucking easy. So we had to call it GST, Goods and Services Tax, instead. But we've got an equivalent thing in Australia. I don't know. I know nothing about that situation. The only time I usually find when people want to be sole traderships is they want to do some funny business with GST. But I know nothing of that. I make no claims to know anything about the specific situation. Okay. So the next thing is, I mean, he's you know, this guy's a little bit uppity. You decide, I'm not just going to sit down completely. And as I understand, your first reactions to him were quite assertive back to him as well. You know, you weren't going to take any bullshit. How do you, in reflection at the end of this process now, has it taught you something about how you communicate in the community? How do you feel about those first reactions now when you maybe weren't so eloquent in all of your words?
Yeah, I think probably, reflecting now, I shouldn't have replied when I did. Probably taken a couple of days and made a more considered approach. I think I stand by what I wrote at the time. So, I mean, even if there'd have been less of the fuck you and all that stuff in there and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it'd have been worded a little bit differently, definitely. I think even then, based on what I knew before, obviously about him and the situation and what's copyright, what isn't, obviously it uses Sony code in the thing and all that sort of stuff, I'd have probably still made the initial, I'm going to do this. However, I would have chose a better date because stupidly I was on freaking holiday. So I had to break off from my suntanning duties on a beach, put the cerveza down and go off and make a fucking blog post about it. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, I got the feedback about that off my partner. Like, why the hell have you said the 14th of August, you prick? Whatever it was. So yeah. In hindsight, I think I'd have taken a couple of days to think about it a little bit more, I think, and probably, worded that a little bit differently.
Sure. So we're not saying we need to back down to bullies, but okay, maybe there are different ways to come at that. I don't think actually in this conversation I've been so clear with this earlier on, but we may as well jump into this bit here. Now, we were talking about this library and the library that your friend and you don't want to be associated, and this library that we're just speaking about. You need those libraries to access parts of the hardware. Now, it has come out, I don't know, did you find it out or someone else found it out that the PSIO official firmware, the official version that comes, their solution is to just use the Sony libraries and use the Sony code. Is that correct? Or what you've seen?
No. So when PSIO put out their information on their GitHub about, this is how the menu's encrypted, this is what the different files do. Literally, as soon as I saw that, went straight through it, ran the Python tools to decrypt it and have a look at what was in there. And then literally you can just drop a file straight in a hex editor and you're just seeing Sony, library, copyright, blah, blah, all the way through it. That wasn't anything to do with my friend's code that I've used.
Right.
That was literally, this predates all that. That was how that we came across that, was literally just looking through the code and you can see it straight there, clear as day. Sony's peppered all over it.
And okay, and now sometimes if there's a library it's like if the library's there, you could sort of use it, but he would have had to package that up into the PSIO firmware, and that's definitely not approved with a license, let's say. It's not like that library just exists somewhere and he was just accessing it. He actually had to take the Sony code, incorporate it into his own code, and then is distributing that in the PSIO firmware? Or how does that library get?
So basically, the way that Matt's written the software for PSIO is used the official PSIQ, or however you want to pronounce it, the Sony tools, what developers did back in the day. So rather than using an open source solution that uses modern tools and compilers, he's just used the old tools. And obviously that library then forms part of that, the PSIQ library. So all this, the stuff for accessing CD, the CD part of it, the bit that loads in graphics and it's got the fancy stuff on it and all that lot. That's all PSIQ code that's in there. And that's, like I said, and because he wrote it using the official development kit, when you compile the code, those libraries get linked and obviously become part of the executable, which ends up on the thing.
Okay, gotcha. And if that is Sony proprietary stuff, so if you don't have a license for that, you can't be doing that sort of stuff, or at least one shouldn't be.
I'm not a lawyer, I can't comment on that, but I think it's one of those that probably don't give a shit anymore because it's so old. But I think when you're making a commercial product and you're selling something and you're making money out of it, like this is, and you're using something that was commercial, which did have a cost attached to it and a license, I think you're potentially on dodgy ground. It's not. I wouldn't want to be doing it that way anyway. I'd rather be completely clean. But Matt chose this route for whatever reason, for maybe familiarity with the toolkit itself, because he was used to using it or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's a question a lot of people sort of came to the first mind. First of all, oh my God, actually PSIO is included copyright unlicensed Sony code. But that's only, going to get him in trouble officially if Sony or whoever is the current license holder of that takes some action against that person. Exactly. Or maybe, I don't know, someone who's an intermediary seller says, I don't want to be involved in this. I'm just imagining here, if he sold it on, I don't know, Amazon, and Amazon said, this looks dodgy, we're not going to let you sell it on our platform. But beyond that, someone actually has to take action, some rights holder, and I guess he's too small fry for Sony to look at that shit anymore, or...
I think that's it, yeah. I think it's basically, Sony are Sony out there, and this is something that relates to a computer that came out in like 1994. The software's way old. They've made their money on that manyfold. They probably couldn't give a shit anymore. There's probably, to be fair, they probably would care more about the fact that he's used the Crash Bandicoot and stuff like that all over his website without actually getting permission. And you've got running stuff of games like Tekken on there. They will probably be things that would be more interested in than the fact that he's used the library code from way back when. But yeah, it would be Sony that would need to do that.
Right, and I think more than like some legalese thing that the lawyers are going to come. To me personally, it just speaks more to the moral standpoint of this. When someone says, you've used my stuff, Matt saying this stuff, but okay, the pot's calling the kettle black over here because you're not exactly you haven't got clean hands either in this situation.
No, I think that's the thing that really, really riled me about it, and it really got my back up, which is why I wrote that initial response that I did, was, this motherfucker's using Sony library shit here, and like I'm using bare GCC 12. I'm using part of an example that were written by Jonathan, the guy who wrote Unirom. He's got like a Hello World example, which is like some proper bare startup code. I use that. The font came from some site called 8-Bit Fonts, which I then converted and ran in. There's not a single byte of anything in there that's Sony copyright at all in what I've done. And I've not even, I won't even know how to reverse engineer code, let alone his anyway. But yeah, so there's literally not touched a thing of his, and then he starts spouting all that stuff. So yeah, it's I think that was the thing that got my back up the most, to be honest.
All right, so you're talking about the Litemenu, or the development is continuing. It's starting to form this thing called Litemenu. You're adding more features to it. You're talking about it. And now there was this, because walk us through this thing where you it was like an ultimatum as well. This time limit ultimatum. What sends you down this line of, talk us through what you did and why did you do that?
So, yeah, I was kind of in the moment on that, thinking about it. So I was quite riled, obviously, because of the exchanges we'd had. And it was like, right, this guy keeps dropping a carrot, saying, dangling a carrot, I'm going to bring it out soon, I'm going to bring it out soon. It was supposed to be bringing it out, and then PSIO did what they did, and then it's like, this is further delayed it and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, I'm going to give him the opportunity to do the right thing.
Okay.
You know, I'm not saying deliver a firmware a menu that's stupidly fast, that does all these development functions, that has MC Pro support and all that stuff. Just fucking do something. You know, do something for your users at least. There's been, you know, it's nearly 2.5, 3 years at this point. So I was like, well, I'll give him 4 weeks. So I just thought, you know, and I talked it over with some people, like, yeah, why not? Like, you know, he might do the right thing, and he might release the menu in an updated menu or an updated firmware for his device. And if he don't, well, people have got Litemenu to play around with. Yeah, and that was basically the rationale behind that. Was it was trying to just turn his hand a little bit and just say, come on, mate, just put something out. But yeah, obviously didn't work very well.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Going full on at him. So how do you then? We're trying to explore both sides of this here. And I thank you that you're being quite open with this, and you do seem to acknowledge your strengths and weaknesses here. Let's say, which I appreciate this in conversation. How do you feel about the idea that if you had released Litemenu, that it might, or I mean, it bypasses the DRM that the original developer put in. Now, for better or for worse, whether that's good DRM or what that is, and now I know I can see already, I got you there, is that a valid concern, and how do you feel about that?
I don't agree with that term, if I'm perfectly honest.
Sure.
So,
okay.
DRM, so yeah, it don't have any. Like, it literally doesn't have any. You know, you put an ISO on that SD card, the fucking thing runs it. Like, there's nothing to stop it from doing that. So when I put my own code on it and just name it menu.sys, there we go. That's it. There's nothing else to stop you accessing that hardware. It's not like you've got some weird key exchange. You've got to say hello Matt and it says hello back, or there's some weird algorithm or exchange of data to make it work. There's nothing. Literally, it just runs. So all I did was make an ISO that, you know, renamed, did the thing and controlled it. There's nothing, there is no rights management or anything to crack to make it do it. It's just sat there waiting for you to give it the commands, and that's all I did, gave it them.
Okay, so like you were saying, I could just get my copy of Tekken and rename it, or is it literally as easy as renaming the ISO to menu.sys?
Yeah, if you've got a game that'll
run Tekken.
Yeah. I mean, it'll run Tekken. You won't get stuff like the audio working maybe properly. You'll get sound effects. You'll get music. But yeah, you could put Ridge Racer ISO in, then you'll be able to drive around the track. You wouldn't have the music, but you'd have the sound effects. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, correct.
Okay. And also by this stage, it's not quite a defense, but the Chinese had already been selling these clones. They'd already done something. So there's no cracking here. There's no hacking. There's no decryption of security protocols or something like that. Like, so if I understand, the DRM that the original developer put in was in the code of their PlayStation menu. So it would run anything, and that was in the middle of that where maybe he's checking for serials or something like that?
Correct, yeah. So I believe the way that it works, the reason why it takes so long is because to start up initially is because it's doing a checksum of itself. So what that's doing is that menu, it's not actually stopping you from running another menu. It's trying to stop you from tampering with the menu itself. Okay. So obviously it's protecting itself because it's saying, hang on a minute, this checksum don't add up. That's because there's been some bytes done. Right, I'm not going to boot, or it'll come with an error or whatever, I'm not sure. And then also you've got the added thing about, in the newer versions, I believe he's got a bit of a blacklist in there of serial numbers or something. But yeah, that's it. That's all it does. It literally protects the menu itself. So yeah, you run your own code. You don't need any DRM, and you're not cracking anything.
Okay, expert hacker here. All right, all we did was replace an ISO file. So that was interesting to get into the idea of what is this hacking? What is this thing behind it? Because you've said here's the deadline. It's August 14, and Matt, you get some communication. What communication are we getting from him?
So I initially obviously sent him that email saying, you know, fuck off. And then he replied and just basically said the same thing. That I think it's all on my GitHub, I think. But yeah, he came back with like, you know, I don't know where you got your legal info from. You know, I want the name of your solicitor or your legal counsel and all this sort of bullshit. And then he made light of an allegation that I made about his identity online, the whole Matt Shadow, whatever, you know, the fact and all this stuff. Yeah, and Yeah, and that was basically it. After that, we had no other further exchanges. So I just left it like that. And then, yeah, after obviously then went around the ultimatum and we just left it like that. So yeah, nothing else. I heard nothing else from him since.
Okay, so what was the final thing? What then made you change your mind? And you went, that's it, I'm not going to release it. There's too much shit. Fuck this. I'm done. Was it that last one where he's like, give me the name of your lawyer. I've got lawyers involved, blah, 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 blah?
No, it wasn't that. So yeah, I got some legal advice from a friend of a friend before I wrote the initial response. And when we had dinner, they were sort of saying like, I'd feel bad taking your money to even look into this shit because this is fucking amateur night. Yeah. However, after that, when we were talking, so the one thing that you do need to consider is that there are other legal avenues that people can take, and it can actually cost you money. So there's a whole civil route. Having to deal with the whole thing about just having to deal with email exchanges and things like that, and maybe having to get things written by a solicitor to respond to. I'm in it for the goodwill and all that lot, but I'm not being out of pocket for it, and I'm not having letters sent to my personal address and things like that. And that was one of the things that was one of the circumstances that made me think, right, I've got children, I've got a partner, I've got a job, I've got a house, all periphery around the PlayStation, nothing to do with it. This could get a little bit messy, and ultimately decided maybe not the right thing to do.
This is an understandable point. So I think if people haven't been involved in legal proceedings before or something hasn't happened, it's not like instantly there's a judgment made and guilty or not guilty money involved. There is a process, and you are going, if someone, and the first thing I ever learned in business was the first time someone threatens me with legal action. It's happened a number of times before, and hey, now I'm used to it, so it's okay. It doesn't faze me anymore. Whenever somebody says, threatens legal action, the first thing I am now programmed to say is, okay, I understand. I will not be speaking to you anymore. Please, whatever you now say to me will be responded to by my lawyer. So as soon as they threaten, there's no more conversation. So that is actually really a good way to get out a lot of it, because if they're bluffing straight away, I'm like, why didn't you talk to me? Because you threatened legal action. Legally, I shouldn't communicate. As soon as you threaten legal action to me, I should not communicate with you anymore. And our interactions should go through legal terms to cover us, or go through legal officers or legally trained people. So if I get, so let's say the bluff isn't, so bluffs, let's say I get a lawyer's letter, which has happened before. So this happened to me. In my business is I run a stand-up comedy production company in Estonia. And right. My guys, we put videos to YouTube, and a couple of my guys made some videos making fun of literally the local chippy. Like literally the fucking local chippy, the fish and chip store that everyone goes to at 2 a.m. We all know, we've all been there, making fun of the quality of the 2 a.m. chippy, right? And then we get a letter from them saying, these two videos they have made, we demand that you take them down. We demand that all of this. And it's clearly bullshit. They're just getting themselves worked up. They have nothing to stand on. These are personal opinions that are said by individuals, and this is absolutely protected. They've got no leg to stand on. However, when someone sends us a legal letter, I believe we are obliged to reply from a lawyer. If you send me a letter from a lawyer, I'm not writing back myself. Even if I'm completely 100% correct, I'm not stupid enough to reply back myself. I then pass that information over to my lawyer. They spend whatever their time is to construct a legalese letter that says the same thing, you're fucking stupid, but in lovely legal terms. And that means I have to pay the lawyer to do that. And in this particular instance, I'm saying with the local chippy, that was still 700, 800 euros by the time the letters get done. I got to go meet them. I got to explain, because the lawyer doesn't just like write what you say. They, hey, write this. No, they want to meet you.
Yeah.
Of course, they want to hear what's going on. They want to hear all the information. And it's easy enough if it's a video on YouTube where someone says some shit, right? But then you've got to meet with a lawyer. You've got to explain all this technical stuff. You've got to explain libraries. You've got to explain the 3 separate parts of the code. This is a number of hours of lawyers' time. Then they're going to take some time to look up the statute. Then they're going to take some time to actually draft the letter. 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours, easy. Times that by whatever your lawyer's rate is. Grand, bam, there's $1,000 right there, straight up. Just
easy
to reply to this person. Now, even if I saw the letter that came from Matt. It's coming from him personally.
Oh, fuck yeah,
so,
yeah.
Right, there's no lawyers involved here. But nevertheless, there's threats of legal action. Oh, I've got this. I've got a solicitor. I've got this. So we want to protect ourselves. You've got a family. You don't want to fuck around. You know, you've got a life. So what I'm trying to paint this longer picture of here is that even though Matt is clearly talking way out of his backside, as soon as someone starts to say all this legal stuff, then you've got to respond in kind, and that is instantly expensive. So is that part of the thinking that went through your mind?
It was partly that, yeah. So, yeah, over here you're looking at £250 an hour plus VAT, 20%. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, 10 hours, £2,500 plus VAT. So, yeah, there was that in the back of my mind. The other thing was, it wasn't necessarily the whole legal part of it. It was more the things that could be done that are maybe not legal or not using the legal system. Okay. So the way, if you look at the exchanges we had, the initial contact he had with me, he actually found my details due to some database leak or something on a forum from fuck knows when. Okay. Now, I'm thinking to myself, if this guy's willing to stoop to shit like that, you can go around and look on Google and there's people that'll find people for 50 quid in the UK and they'll give you an address. You pay 100, they'll take a picture of them on the doorstep. And I'm thinking all these kind of things like, do I want that invasion of privacy just for some fucking menu? Yeah, and that's kind of where I was at with it. It was partly the legal thing, smaller, but the bigger thing, it was just generically the threat of Matt. And he's threatened to dox people in the past. My information's out there, obviously not really where I live or anything, but you can find out a lot about me. You can find pictures of me and stuff like that. Just not worth it. That was it. It was not worth it. But in the same time as I'm sort of considering my options, this is like coming up to the days before when it was like D-Day, if you like. PSIO, and we reached out and ended up having some email exchanges, and they were like, "We're on with this already, mate." So I wasn't I'm not a member of them or anything. I literally joined them towards the end, but they were like, "Yeah, we've kind of got something in the works. So maybe consider that with your options." So I'm like, well, we've got these people. I don't know who the fuck they are. I don't know if they're male, female, where in the world they're from. I suspect somewhere over Russia way, just with a really crap translation, but I'm not 100% sure. And they were on with something, and it was like, well, they're going to feed the need of these people. They're going to release something open source. That kind of gets me off the hook. And that really made me then think, right, yeah, I think I need to bow out of this. So, yeah.
It's fair enough. And it's look, at the end of the day, you've got a family, you've got a life, all this online fucking drama and bullshit. There comes some point where, look, okay, good, I'm out.
Yeah, totally. And I think, as a lot of people said, quite some, two people that probably attacked me quite a lot in mails and things. But even then, as that as a side, there was some people on some Discords or some other people on Twitter and stuff that were sort of saying like, you say you don't want drama, but then you're doing this. And I'd probably agree with that in hindsight now. Maybe I shouldn't have been such a cock in my initial response and so gung-ho about it. To only then renege on the promise that I made. So yeah, I think, maybe I shouldn't have done that, to be honest. And I do agree with what they said about that. I don't want drama, and I probably shouldn't have replied in the way that I did initially, and maybe there wouldn't have been as much. Who knows?
It's a hard one to say. So if you, because first of all, it seems like, it's a hard one to say because, you were quite assertive, also opinionated with your replies to Matt. But if you have a bully, if you playstate the bully and, just work around them, does that, is that going to work? Is there any flanking this person at all? Because the legal letter that you got from them, my interpretation of that is it's the equivalent of when there's drama out the front of the chippy at 3 a.m. and your way to de-escalate the situation is just to go crazy nuts at them. Come at them like that. Just try and scare them off. Even though, if an actual fight broke out, you really couldn't do anything. I like that you're reflecting on this. And I think this is a very good sign for you, that you have that ability to reflect, look back at yourself. I did some things good. There's things I would have improved. And I think that's one of the things why I've enjoyed this conversation with you as well, because look, hey, we've all done some dumb things. We've all done crazy things. Was it dumb or not? I don't know. I'm going to leave this judgment to somebody else, but we've all done actions in the past and had interactions that we can look back on and say, hey, I probably could have dealt with that in a different way or more diplomatically. Would it have helped? Can't say, but I appreciate your thinking.
Yeah, and I think, it's all part of the journey, isn't it? It's not about where you're going. And you learn things on the way. And that's everything I've done with PlayStation is always about a journey. So it's not about hitting a goal. It's about the things that you learn on the way. And that was one of those things. It's just, while it was helping me on the way, I was looking at, I could maybe help other people on the way. And then, we had these negative forces and hindsight, wonderful thing, huh?
Indeed it is. We learn. Everything is learning. I like this a lot. So to kind of wrap up the end of this story here, so the PSIO guys, who knows where they're from? They're from somewhere we don't know, but they also shut down as well. If I look at their GitHub too, do you know what was up with them? Deciding to close the same reasons?
Yeah, so I basically joined them. Mm-hmm. So when I started making the discussion, they were saying we're on with this menu. They were like, well, we've actually made some inroads into this already. We've got some bits working. What have you got working? Do you want to compare notes? So I just sent literally a list of commands that I had that worked. Mm-hmm. I did various things to them and they ran with the rest of it. After that, and obviously after I put out things saying I'm not going to release Litemenu, I started getting a lot of abuse off an individual. I won't name because it's irrelevant. But yeah, this particular individual was going all over my YouTube, so I had to switch all the comments off on really old videos and stuff. They were talking about my dog and things like that. And literally everywhere I went, this guy was just giving it some fucking banter. And I'm not on Twitter, I'd have been on me on that. I was just talking to these guys on the Discord channel. I was like, I'm just sick of this guy all over me. What are we going to do about it? Because, he's talking to you, PSIO, about this stuff, not knowing that I'm part of you, and I just want him to fuck off. So they were just like, well, just email him off the PSIO email. Just tell him who you are, tell him to back the fuck off, because if he doesn't, we're not playing ball anymore, we're not doing it anymore. And I was like, yeah, but you can't make this about me, this is your work. And they were like, we don't really give a fuck, we just want it to crack the thing. And we've done that, we're not bothered about writing a menu for his shitty firmware, because it's shit. You can't polish a turd. That was basically what they're thinking. So I was like, fair enough. So obviously they gave me the credentials, logged in Proton Mail, sent this chap an email saying, mate, back the fuck off, this is who I am. You're going to ruin the project if you keep going on like this. So he just basically outed my entire email on Twitter. So PSI were just like, fuck this, and shut it down. And that was that. So yeah, it was due to the individual. If you look on the PSI on site, on their GitHub, it does explain the story and the exchange on there. But yeah, that was basically why, because we're not in it to be dealt with, talked to like that. We're not in it to be bullied, called slurs and things like that. We're in it for the fun, we're in it for the game, we're in it for the chase, we're in it for, just have a good time and help people out with things. And this guy's getting personal and he's, like gay slurs and all sorts of shit like that. And it was just like, I don't need that in my life. And they were like, we don't want anything to do with it either. So yeah, basically that individual spoiled it for everyone.
Was this individual, and I didn't quite understand, were they unhappy because you didn't release it, or were they unhappy because you had developed it? Why were they unhappy? I don't understand.
I believe there's something, or they're connected to the people or the team that have cracked the original firmware, that are now doing various things for PDA and stuff like that. I don't know anything about them guys, you know, like fucking respect to them. They've cracked the firmware. They're doing, you know, they're bringing updates to people that have got these things, you know, fair play. But yeah, this guy was something to do with that. And he was aggrieved. So when I started Litemenu and I started up with a GitHub repo explaining what it was about, it was in there saying, you know, you need to do this feature, we need multi-disk support, we need this. Yeah, and then obviously I said that I'm not going to release it, and then he's like, "Oh, you've got no fucking balls. You're just a typical British queen and all this shit." Just stuff like that, and it was just like, yeah, it was just basically. I think his line was something like, "I don't like people that go back on the word, and I'm a man of principle," and all this kind of alpha dog shit, and it was just like, well, whatever. So yeah, it just aggrieved that I didn't release Litemenu, basically.
Fair enough.
Best I can tell.
Look, thanks for going through that, because it's not good when I can't take it. Like when people are like abusing you online and shit like that. Like I feel terrible. So thank you for describing that to us, because just even dig it up, you know, it's a real negative kind
It's
of
quite cathartic, if I'm honest. It's
good.
Yeah, I've not really talked about it much. So like, yeah, literally, obviously we're talking. We're in a Discord and we'll talk about stuff like that. We didn't really talk about it much in there. It's drama. We don't really talk about drama. I spoke to my partner about it. My kid knows about it and stuff like that. And that was about it. And it was like, do you know what? It'd be quite... And the other thing that's quite nice talking to as well is A, it feels quite good talking about it and getting it off my chest, but B, it's like setting the record straight. There's a lot of stuff that got said on Twitter and things like that, and people have got opinions on certain things. And, you know, some quite famous people on YouTube that reckoned it was fake, and it was just, you know, just knocked some images together. It was all staged. It doesn't exist, you know, which it fucking does. So yeah, there was littles like that. So yeah, it's quite good just to talk about it, get things off my chest, and set the record straight, I guess, and fill in some details. So yeah, it's all good.
Good. I guess. Well, if someone wanted proof, if I understood, they could just rename the ISO to menu.sys. Something would boot, and you at least have proof that this thing can like run, right? Like this is not all snake oil, right? Like, okay, yes, you're still hiding the actual menu commands that you need to interact with the PSIO. But if anyone wants proof, just take an ISO, rename it to menu.sys, and you'll see, oh, it boots. Well, this is the kind of the proof we're trying to say here, that this is not some snake oil. This is true.
Yeah, and it's not hard. Like, you know, I'm not a reverse engineer. I'm literally just a guy who knows a bit about electronics and knows some bits about logic, and I've been pissing around with the thing since I was a kid. And the thing is that made this so easy was because the fucking debug output of this thing tells you literally everything what it's doing, and you can literally just time code it with Venue, and you can just work it out. So yeah, it sends a command to get a game list, and then next thing you know, you read 3 sectors on the CD at a certain location, and it starts reading out the list of the games that are on the SD card with the folder names. And then you've got that, and to the order that they're presented in, you just say, "Oh, right, so that's number 16 in that list. Right, send this command with the parameter 16," and it loads that fucking game. It's like, yeah, it's literally something like 6 commands to do the whole thing. It's not rocket science, and it's not hard. And most people out there that are into this PlayStation development and stuff like that could do this themselves really easily. It's just no one gives a shit. Most of them don't, which is why no one else has done it. But I just happen to be the person that knew a little bit, had the kit, and had a little bit of drive to do it. But yeah, it's dead easy to get to do.
Fair enough. So as we're coming to the end here with a few wrap-ups, is there anything else about this whole melodrama Days of Our Lives that you want to send through the hourglass? Is there anything else that we've missed, or some, I guess, thought? You said it's cathartic, things that you want to sort of set the record straight. Is there anything here that we haven't done that with so far?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that, like when we talked initially, sort of at the start, we were saying about, you know, why I don't have an official PSIO, and I've never wanted to deal with Matt. So I talked about I used to be on a forum called Assembler Games. So the person that you know as Matt actually joined that forum as somebody under the name of Haunted, and was literally a child. They were really... Like they were saying, they had the blue sky idea of a PSIO, but they had no clue about actually how to go about it. They got banned like 3 times, like various remarks. They didn't have a clue. Yeah, so there was all that. So I knew of this Haunted stroke Matt guy back then. And then we got the PSX Dev forums that started up, psxdev.net. The person that owns that is called Matt. and their username on there is Shadow, but Matt in PSIO calls himself Matt, but he pretends that they're two different people, even though it's the same person. So he's trying to keep that person separate. So it was like, I know this guy from years ago, from being a little bit, immature and a bit of a dickhead on assembler games. Is he the sort of person that I want to spend like over £100 with and wait 9 months for a product from? Is he the kind of person that's going to deliver me these promised features that he hasn't yet delivered? I don't think so. And more came out about that story and about some of the initial developers that helped with PSIO, like with the menu system and stuff like that. A guy called Gemini, who literally wrote how it looks, he wrote that. And that's being used now, but Gemini's no longer part of the project because he walked away from it because Matt wouldn't be open source. And there was a lot around that made me make that decision. This is not the kind of guy I could spend money with. However, if someone in the UK has got a PSIO, a legit one, and want to sell it to me, drop me a line. I'm quite happy to buy it. I just do not want to spend money with Matt, to be honest. So yeah, that was the main thing, I think, because there's a lot before this that I knew about Matt. And also the PSX.dev Discord, he kind of got aggrieved and wanted to take control of it. And we had a massive fallout about that, and he ended up starting his own Discord, and then we kept ours. And so there's a lot of other things that went on prior to this. And there's a lot of history there. So that's basically why I would never buy one, because we've got previous beef, and it's not somebody I'd be comfortable sending a lot of money to and expect to receive a product, or even more so expecting any support from either if I needed it. So yeah.
Fair enough. And it's good to explain these nuances of the situation. So that is some of the negative aspects there, but you have been quite humble and quite polite in highlighting others in the community who have helped you and aided you. So you want to give them a shout out and a bit of credit here for other developers who, the giants whose shoulders you have stood on, let's say.
Shit, yeah, man, there's a few. So, oh God, yeah. First and foremost, probably Sicklebrick for writing Unirom. Which is a great tool that you can use for doing various things on a PlayStation, playing backups, loading code, backing up memory cards, that kind of thing. He's done some great work releasing some examples, been able to use like modern compilers and stuff. Without that, I wouldn't have written anything that I've written today. Everything I use uses that as boilerplate and is built on that. And I've learnt so much just from looking at his code and how it's put together. It's taught me untold things. So there's Sicklebrick, Nicholas Noble, Grumpy Coder, fantastic guy. Doesn't always tell you everything you need to know, but it drops enough information to make you hungry for it, to kind of find out things for yourself.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic guy. Taught me again from like the electronics side of it, saying, "Oh, why don't you try connecting this?" Or "I've done this before," and stuff like that. So we've done some great stuff with things like that with bits of hardware. So he's a top guy. He's written a Visual Studio code plugin, so you can literally just download everything you need to develop on PlayStation in about 3 clicks, which is fantastic. It's on the marketplace. Obviously, he writes PCSX Redux, the emulator, which is indispensable for developing. So yeah, those two guys, probably the main ones. Outside of that, probably everybody else on the PSX Dev Discord, if I'm honest. Sure. Be it Assembler, who's back from the PS2 days. Names. Fucking hell. Yeah,
it's all right, I put you on the spot like an Oscar
species. But there's loads, man. But yeah, I think probably the people that I talked to the more that have been the most helpful for me, it'll be Sicklebrick and Nicholas Noble. They're the biggest drivers of the things that have helped me to get where I am today, definitely.
And thank you for the introduction to Nicholas. So I'm going to talk to Nicholas next. And learn about him and have a good old techie chat with him too. So that's a good one. To wrap it up, Dan, what's next? What are we hacking next? What's caught your eye that you might want to work on?
So at the minute, I'm having a bit of time away from PlayStation, if I'm honest.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I'm just I'm fixing up an old Atari ST that I've just got sat beside of me. So yeah, I've just got that working. And then the other thing I play around with a little bit, which is a weird one, is Philips CDI.
Oh yeah, all right.
Yeah, totally shit console, don't get me wrong, but it's the hardware that makes me tick more than anything. So yeah, I've started building a lot of hardware into the back of that and exploring the operating system it runs a little bit and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I've had some stuff to deal with at work recently, so getting that out of the way as we get towards Christmas, and I'll be back doing things on the PlayStation again. So yeah, there's Nicholas can talk about it, but he's literally made a little piece of hardware that you can bolt to an old Action Replay cartridge. Gives you a high-speed data link between your PC and PlayStation. Unirom's getting support for that shortly, so I'll be probably working on things with that and seeing what can be done with that, pushing data between the two. Yeah, and I never know, I might get that part of Chuckie Egg done eventually. Let's see.
So the future of PlayStation 1 homebrew is looking strong right now. There's an active community.
Oh, yeah, shit, yeah. So, like, yeah, like, literally, like, the past couple of years, there's been some great stuff. So, a lot of it's always been the tools to get you to develop on it. You've been using these old compilers that run in MS-DOS, setting it all up in a VM and stuff can be tricky. And all that's got a lot easier. So, yeah, you've got things like what they call Noob SDK, which is another SDK that you can use. Nicholas himself, he can talk about it, but he's brought out another software development kit called Psycho, which builds on PsyQ but uses C++. So there's so many options now for getting into it and developing. And there's an active community on the Discord, so there's always people that can help. So, you know, if you've got the drive and a bit of the knowledge to get going, there's people there that will help you along your way, which we didn't really have before. So, yeah, it's an interesting time to be involved in that, and all the optical drive emulators that are out now. You know, Fixel's bringing one out, I think. Obviously, Rama's got his new one coming out whenever that comes out. You've got XStation, you've got this. You know, you don't even need to burn discs anymore. You can literally just master an ASO, develop it in an emulator, try it on an ODE, and off you go. So, yeah, good time. And yeah, there's not a lot out at the moment compared to other platforms, so there's plenty to get after. It's pretty exciting.
Good. All right, Dan, stay on the line just for a second. I'm going to finish off the podcast here. Thank you very much for listening. I've really enjoyed this discussion here. Learned more about the situation, trying to dig into the nuances. Look, like, subscribe, just follow on audio platforms. I don't care. Just listen wherever you can. I appreciate that. We're going to have some more episodes of the Cathode Ray podcast with my good friend Steve soon. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.